Hello, this is Joe Trahan, welcoming you to the All Me podcast from the Taylor Hooten Foundation, whose mission is to enlighten the world to the truths about appearance and performance-enhancing substances. As the national leader on this subject, they communicate their educational messages through various methods, including this podcast. Thank you for listening and enjoy the show.
Hi, and welcome to the All Me podcast. My name is Tavis Piatoli, sports dietitian for the Taylor Hooten Foundation, and today I'm going to be your host. The National Institute of Mental Health estimates that 16.2 million U.S. adults had at least one major depressive episode in 2016. This represents 6.7% of the U.S. adult population. Depression is the most common in ages 18 to 25, as well as in individuals belonging to two or more races. So what are the primary factors that are contributing to the mental health issues and illnesses found in adults today? Is there a link between too much social media use and an increased risk for mental health illness? And can counseling improve outcomes of our mental state? These are the questions, as well as many others, we discuss with Brandi Garza, a licensed professional counselor who works with a variety of individuals to help them overcome their daily struggles. At 11 years old, Brandi declared therapy to be hers. As a person adopted at 13 years old, she has the unique lens of living on both sides of the tracks. Brandi lived an experience as a child of parents in poverty, with addiction, and severe mental illness. She attributed her very survival to those that leaned into her humanity to truly see her. Over the last 18 years in the mental health field, she can sum up her purpose in those three words. She is the most joyous and at peace in her work when she has guided a human being to be seen. Parents seeing their children, peers, colleagues, siblings, scholars to staff, or in the most precious sessions to see the self. As a first-generation high school graduate, UTT college graduate, mother, adoptee, proud Pan woman, Brandi has been given some unique perspectives that allow her as a therapist and employee to be an expert empathizer. Her work with shelters, juveniles, urban communities, the work of addiction, and so much more has only strengthened her belief that we are all human beings that have a human experience begging to be seen. We also want to let you know that May is Mental Health Awareness Month. So if you have someone struggling with any type of mental health issues, let's help them and get them to find some help within a local community and local licensed professional. Also, be sure to share this podcast with anyone you feel would be beneficial to listen to the work that we do. We'd also like to thank our partners at Gatorade for sponsoring this podcast. Brandi, thank you so much for joining us today on the All Me podcast. How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Doing great. It's Mental Health Awareness Month. We know this is a very important topic to share, and I'm looking forward to kind of learning more about your expertise and really helping a lot, millions of lives, right? This is an important topic we know a lot of people struggle with, so I'm excited to have you. Every question I like to kind of talk, and when I talk to professionals, is really about their career path. Really, let's kind of talk about what interested you in the field of mental health and really helping individuals struggle with this area.
Yeah, I think the most obvious answer for most of us therapists is our childhood. And I'm certainly no exception. I had a very volatile upbringing until I was 13. And I literally went from the trailer park to 3 doors down from Emmett Smith. And, it was like a culture shock, and not just, financially, but all the way around. And so I've actually known since I was a little girl getting, CPS visits at school that I wanted to be a counselor. So I'm just one of those like super obnoxious people that knew my family was extremely sick and that counselors made me feel better. And I wanted to do that. And so I've literally just never wanted to be anything else. It's so annoying. This is it, right? And the more I do it, the more I love it. And not much has changed over the years.
It's always great to have a personal story, right? And why you choose to do that, because you feel like your life was impacted by someone, some people, a group of whatever that is. And then you're like, wow, that made me feel a certain way. And I want to now do that for others and pay it forward. That's amazing.
Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about just the whole mental health topic in general. So what is considered a mental health illness? And, is there a specific diagnosis that's involved in that process?
Yeah. And so I think when people say mental illness or mental disorder, we want to make sure that we're kind of differentiating or really understanding the usage of those words. I'm a licensed professional counselor. So in Texas, what that means is that I have to get a master's. I have to do, at the time, I think it was 3,000 internship hours. And through that process and through assorted other criteria, one of the things that we look at in our master's program and then throughout our practice is we use the DSM-5 currently. We've had 4 other versions, and that's the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual. And that is what we're looking at for disorders. When you look at that, it's not like the mental illness book. We have mental disorders. And frankly, I ask clients probably once a week, a client or two, they'll say to me, do you think I have this? And, they're usually like worried about like mental personalities, disorders. And the question is, if it is causing disorder in your life, it's worth investigating, right? And then in the DSM, we actually have criteria, and it's usually written something like, do you meet 5 out of 9 of these, bullet points? And they're pretty direct. And so I encourage people frequently Google it. I don't know how many clinicians are asking people to Google, but the DSM is not private publications. There ain't no secrets. By all means, if you think you have narcissism, Google it. And then talk to a professional to really process what your findings were versus other people.
Excellent. Yeah, I've kind of looked at some of that stuff before just to think, my ex-wife was like, you're a narcissist. And I'm thinking, let me see if I fit those characteristics. And I'm like, okay, maybe at times in my life, I probably was a little bit narcissistic, and I'll own that and make those mistakes, or at least admit to those mistakes. And I think that's important when you can kind of look at yourself and reflect back, like, okay, wow, that's what I did. I'm like, I need to change, right? That I need to do some behavior modification.
Absolutely. Let's
talk about the prevalence of mental health today, right, in adults. Okay. How prevalent is that right now?
Okay, so I am only going to speak to the US. I know the world is affected by this, but for the purpose of our conversation, I looked up the most recent data because it's actually something that I don't look up very frequently, but I always refer to either the Center for Disease Control or an organization called NAMI, I think is how they pronounce it, the National Alliance on Mental Illness. And they have some really great one-pagers that I think as anybody listening, you're more than welcome to use, print off, and give to your teams or, what have you. But the stats that they went by were from 2020. And they say that 1 in 5 adults are struggling with a mental illness, that 12 million are having serious thoughts of suicide. So adults being 18 and up. And that is like a broader statistic. And we get a little closer to age, specific. And 18 to 25-year-olds, they're saying 1 in 3 are experiencing mental illness, and 3.8 are having serious thoughts of suicide. And for children 12 to 14, 1 in 6 are experiencing a major depressive disorder. And so, these are big numbers, right? When you're in a church group, that's a big portion of that group. Or when you're on a team, that is a large portion of the team that really can't be ignored. And those are just the people that we know about.
Yeah, that's really scary statistics. When you say 12,000 people are considering suicide, 12 million.
12 million, right?
12 million. Wow, that's 12 million people have thoughts of suicide. That's just absolutely alarming and scary. So let's talk about some of the reasons, right? What are some of the common reasons today that people are struggling with mental health illness?
I mean, I don't think that anything is greater necessarily than previous years and generations other than the media, right? I mean, that's like the most obvious answer. But COVID definitely played a role in the amplification of any of our mental illnesses or disorders that we see. Across the board, numbers like 10 to 35% increases have been reported for anxiety and depression. I heard somebody from the Phoenix House, which is like a drug and alcohol treatment, that said for alcohol use, we're looking at an increase by 65%, which isn't surprising when we're literally getting our Mambo taxis delivered to our house. And drugs are right there along the way. And so, we're a stressed society. We're on social media. We're seeing things that we compare ourselves to. And by all means, when we feel inadequate, it's going to increase our anxiety. It's going to trigger things that we don't even know are there. Maybe we're going to self-medicate or just cope in ways that are genuinely unhealthy and thus unhelpful, and perpetuating those mental disorders. So I don't even know if we have more mental illness than we have had in generations past. I do believe that we are more aware of them, and we're not entirely, but we are less ashamed of admitting those because of programs like yours.
Well, and I think too, you mentioned media. I think one thing we are seeing now, I talked with another sports psychologist last week about just how does that affect athletes, right? And what we're seeing in the media is, at least now we have the media to use as a way to hear more about, hey, these are some serious issues, right? These are things that you would think in people, they don't look like they have issues. They look happy. They're excelling in sport, or excelling in life. And all of a sudden it's like, oh no, I didn't realize there was a problem, right? You mentioned COVID, right? COVID accelerated that. And, when we look at the impact of COVID, did you see an influx or at least an increase in individuals that come and see you because of COVID, because they're locked down, because they don't have access to that social, life that they enjoyed? Did that, I guess, accelerate your business a little bit?
Yeah. I mean, so what's interesting is during COVID, I actually worked in education, and I had a few roles. One was a social counselor, meaning a school counselor. And then I transferred to discipline right at, the first year, essentially, out of COVID or out of our lockdowns. And I went into behavior because so many of our scholars, even though they were struggling with mental illness, their behavior is what was getting them in my office as a counselor. So I was like, let's fix the behavior, and then I can actually be a counselor again. The first year, when everybody was in lockdown, we had almost zero reported behavior because scholars were at home on their phones, zombied out in the classroom. If they were in person, they were zombied out in the classroom on a screen. So with adolescents and with children, it was almost impossible to track. But how I realized personally, so this isn't like a clinical experience, but how I realized that we have an astronomical increase in the need for mental health therapy or treatment is I started job searching. And when I tell you that my industry has never been more in demand, I truly mean it. I put an application out on LinkedIn, and within a week, I had 3 offers. Whereas 7 years ago, I put an application on LinkedIn, and it was 8 months before I got a real good, worthy of hearing offer. And my credentials aren't that much more improved other than time on the job. So, the company I work for in private practice, they're hiring out the wazoo. We are full. Frankly, I don't have an issue getting clients. And so, if anything, COVID at least introduced us as a society to this concept that mental health treatment doesn't have to be on a couch in an office where you're uncomfortable and it's inconvenient. It absolutely can be attainable and convenient and effective. And that is not something that I can say 7 years ago we had as an option.
Right.
So,
well, you just gave me an idea. I know you have questions that we know we're going to talk about, but nothing like a curveball, but it's just people. I'm using myself as an example here because years ago I would say, I don't need to talk to someone about my problem problems. If I have problems, I feel like I can work them out on their own. And I think there's a lot of people that still have that, I'm strong inside, I can fight that. And in reality, I've learned, wow, talking to someone, even if it's a friend, but obviously a professional is going to be much better, really allows you to get a lot of weight off your shoulder, a lot of stress that just is constantly building up. And, we talked a little bit, you mentioned a few things of why people, have mental health issues or common issues, but what are some of the reasons people see you? Is there an outlier that you find that this is really a common denominator? I see a lot of people that struggle with this, but what are some of the common reasons people come to see you?
Right. I mean, when you look at statistics and look at my private practice, they are literally mirrored. And so those same, NAMI, the same organization I referenced before, they have those stats for most common issues. They say that out of all people seeking treatment, 19% of those are seeking treatment for anxiety. From there, it's dramatically dropped to like 8% for depression, 4% for dual diagnosis, meaning maybe I have depression and anxiety, maybe I'm struggling with substance use or abuse and something else. And then 4% for PTSD. And then the rest kind of trail off because frankly, they're significantly more rare. I don't have as many schizophrenic, clients that are struggling with schizophrenia or what have you. My private practice is like exactly that. Primarily anxiety and then depression, and the rest trail from there.
So let's talk about a couple of things. We know when it comes to for those first couple of sessions, right? It's probably an important area, especially when you see a new patient. They probably want to build trust, right? They want to know, is this person going to be somebody I like? So how critical do you feel those first couple of sessions are that you have with that new patient to try to build trust with that individual?
I mean, obviously, if somebody doesn't like you out of the gate, you are not going to have any success in therapy. And for somebody like myself, who is a little more outspoken in a session, I have a little bit more self-disclosure than the average therapist, I would think, that we know pretty quick, probably within the first 30 minutes, if we're going to have at least the beginnings of what could be a good rapport, which is what we kind of call it in our industry. If you do not have good rapport, I would find it very, very difficult to have success. And, that I think has actually been backed up in studies that talk about the success of psychotherapy or talk therapy. Without a relationship, why on earth would I be transparent or vulnerable or eager to talk or what have you? And those are kind of qualities that you really need. You need some transparency in a session, because otherwise we're just working on the lies you made up,
Yeah. And do you feel, if you can establish trust pretty early with that client, they're like, look, this is going to really work well. Do you feel that helps improve outcomes? Because I'm sure there's a lot of sensitive information they want to share with you, especially early on.
Yeah. I mean, the trauma, for instance, is some of the most intimate material that you will carry with you for your lifetime. And frankly, it's not anybody's business what your trauma is. However, we also, in therapy, we have to get to it. It is literally impacting your decisions, your behavior. It is impacting your relationships with other people. Most people, when they come into therapy, are in a crisis. So they're on the verge of a divorce. They are pregnant and now they don't like the person they're knocked up with. Like there is a crisis happening, financial, relational, internal, and that has to be kind of unfolded, if you will. And so if you don't trust the person you're speaking with, you may never actually get to the root of the crisis and not find the change you need, right?
Yeah, no, I definitely understand that. I mean, if you feel like you have that trust and you can open up, then I'm sure that can go a long way, with developing and helping that person change behavior. And it kind of leads to my next question, because is there like a minimum amount of time where you find it takes for your clients to work with you to really see improvement? Is that like at 3 months we start really, I know everybody's probably a little bit different, but do you find like this is a good time frame where I can really start, seeing behavior change? I know for me as a dietitian and working with athletes, I know I need at least 2 months to really get them moving and understanding the value of what this can do for their body. But what do you see in your industry?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I'm in this place of privilege in my industry. I think perhaps other therapists would even disagree with me and say there's a minimum amount of time or whatever. My first session is almost always an emotional dump that has just been held in. They know a session is coming. They dump all of this emotional baggage and then they apologize for it. And almost always, 99% of the time at the end of the session, we hear something along the lines of, well, gosh, I mean, I'm sorry I did that, but I sure feel better already. And so I guess success and progress is extremely relative, because for me, gosh, that is a success. If I never speak to that person again, they at least know that they had a moment of peace. And isn't that what we're kind of searching for? The certain diagnoses are a little more difficult to treat just because of the nature of them. So when we talk about like personality disorders, those are going to be significantly more difficult to treat, because even if somebody is in a crisis, if they have narcissism, it's everybody else's fault. So you may spend a month with somebody talking about the name, blame, and shame other people when you're sitting here knowing darn well, like you played a role in this, and you just kind of have to wait for the person to come to that conclusion on their own, which can be probably the most difficult part of therapy as a therapist, is waiting for you to come to your own conclusion and having your own aha moment, but success is relative. Most people report feeling great at the end of a session because they just got to let it out,
Right. Yeah, it is. It is a wonderful feeling. I used to hold things back, and then boom, I'm like, wow, all I had to do was say what was on my mind, and it's like, okay, I can move on now. I feel better. It's amazing how that feels. I'm sure this question probably has a lot of parts, but I want to try to keep it as simple as I can. But what are you trying to accomplish during each therapy session with your patients? Is it like, if I can just get them to improve by 1%, or and I'm sure it depends on what you're talking about and what you're trying to accomplish. But is there something where you're like, if I can just get them to do this? And I know that's a big question.
Not really, actually. Okay. I think for the majority of therapists who are more on the cerebral side, frequently we use scales, right? Or assessments. And there are hundreds of assessments that we could use. It could be as simple as a weekly ask or a per session ask of, on a scale of 1 to 10, how do you feel with regard to your depression? 10 being I want to die, 1 being none at all. And then every week they do it, and you're hoping to see at least some progress. I certainly use those types of techniques, but not consistently with every single client. So one of my questions at every first session is, what do you want out of therapy? Right? A core belief system of my practice, regardless of whether or not I'm doing a consultation for a school district or a client session or a men sober living group or whatever, is what are your goals for your time here? Right? I have no business setting goals for you when you are the expert on you. And my job is to be a guide with you and an ally with you through finding your goals. Now, obviously, if a client's goals are self-destruction and self-harm and things that are dangerous, then that is something different entirely. But for the most part, clients get to decide for themselves if they've seen significant enough progress, because I reflect back to them where they began and where they are at current session, right? I hope that makes sense.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, I definitely understand. Everybody's going to be different, and you have a sort of protocol you probably want to follow with them. Now, going into this is kind of my favorite question about this because I'm just curious to know what you have in regards to what you've seen. So we've already talked a little bit briefly about social media, right? It's just in everybody's hand. I've been guilty of looking at it too much. I have an 11-year-old that I don't want to say try to control, but I try to limit her time on that now because I know social interaction is going to be a lot more valuable to her growth than looking at a phone and watching someone do a TikTok video. But let's talk about the impact on social media that may increase mental health illness. Is there research that says, look, if someone's looking at social media more or at a certain number of volume, does that increase their risk for mental health illness or anxiety or stress, et cetera?
Right. So I think the first time that I actually even heard about studies and more on like the global standpoint was like back in maybe 2017. And I think Facebook was undergoing their own studies and they were looking at whether or not mental illness or mental health is affected by social media. And at the time, it was like, yes, it is, but it's not our fault. And then we get to like fast forward to like 2022. And we do, in fact, have many studies about when we think of studies, they have to be controlled and they have to be an actual peer-reviewed study. You can't just like wing it, right? This isn't just Brandi, making up some crap on a telephone call. And so we have these studies that are extremely specific, right? So they'll say things like, what is social media's impact on this age group as it relates to anxiety, or as it relates to self-esteem, as it relates to suicidal ideation, meaning thoughts of wanting to kill oneself. And the study is like, absolutely, there's a correlation. We need more studies, right?
Yeah.
The overarching, glaring, huge, flaming flag in all of these studies is it is impacting our youth greater than anyone else.
Wow.
Right? I mean, bar none, our youth are struggling more than anyone else. And you literally see that with adolescents in particular. You literally see that as a reflection in their mental health numbers, right? So our adults are 1 in 5, our kids 12 to 17 are 1 in 6, our youth 18 to 25 are 1 in 3. Right. And so we are seeing a direct correlation. We know that our children are struggling with this, or our adolescents, meaning not just teenagers, but up to 25, or the completion of the brain development. And yet the answer to all of the studies for PC purposes and scientific purposes is we need more studies. So yeah, Google it. It's there.
I can't imagine any social media site going, yes, we cause more stress and anxiety and, we're causing more harm to your children because, right. It's like, they're going to fund a study. That study's going to look like it actually probably reduces anxiety and everything else.
Right. Absolutely. And any teacher, any parent who's been involved in a cyberbullying case, or a sexual assault case that, landed online, or revenge porn, or all of these other heinous things that are happening to 12-year-olds, they will tell you not a correlation. It was a causation to my child's mental health decline, right? Like they absolutely became suicidal as a result of that bullying interaction, which is why, at least in Texas, we have things like David's Law that protect children legally when we know that this stuff is going on.
Yeah. And as a father of an 11-year-old daughter, you can imagine, like any parent, mom, dad, et cetera, we're concerned, right? There's too much access now to kids and individuals. So I'm policing a lot of that stuff as best as I can. I can't wait for my daughter to listen to this because she's like, Dad, none of that stuff's going to happen to me, or, it's not as bad as you make it out to be. Because when you said 1 in 3 between 18 and 25, what are is it because are they seeking acceptance, or are they searching for happiness? What are they trying to get out of social media? And I see that it's like selfies and this and that, and you may not know that, right? This is just a discussion, but I guess my concern is like, what are people getting out of using social media so much to where, like, do they feel they need that to feel accepted?
Right. I mean, I think when you are considering the rapid, what do they call it? Like passive browsing or something along those lines. And it's really just giving us like chemicals in our brain that make us feel good. We get like a little dopamine kick, right? But when you look at developmental phases of human beings, children 12 to 17 are literally asking themselves, what is my identity? And I don't know about you, but I'm older. I didn't have social media. I had an AIM account. And on this account, I couldn't just Google cool punk rock clothes. I had to like go to Deep Ellum and figure out what do punks wear and listen to and what do they like and am I punk? Like that's how I search for my identity.
Right.
If you played sports, then you definitely felt like maybe that was part of your identity. But I really do think that a huge part of why they crave that social media connection is because it's developmentally appropriate for them to do so.
Yeah.
They can go and search any label, any subculture, any identity, and decide within a few hours of browsing millions of photos and videos and comments and blogs and on and on and on. And they can decide, is this a subculture I want to be a part of? Do I want to try it out? Am I more interested in it?
Right.
Like they get to do all the homework right there in the house. And then you go up to 18 to 25 and they're still struggling with identity, but they start graduating into intimacy.
Mm-hmm.
And so now, I mean, maybe the best comparison for us grown-ups, because we're not typically scrolling the same, but I guess some of us are, is like if you go to search for a new couch, back in the day, you had to go to a store and you had to look at the couches. And at the third store, you were like, I hate couches. I don't even want a couch. And you've actually only seen 100. But now we're on social media or we're on Pinterest and I can look at 500 couches in 30 minutes and I know where they're located and how quickly they can get to my house. And the same principle is applying to their level of intimacy. They are looking at millions of people online all day, every day, deciding, is that the kind of person I want? Oh, I'm not good enough for that person. They're sizing each other up. It's literally part of their developmental phase. So that's what they should be doing. Now, could we do it in person and better? Is it healthier in person? I would argue it is, but I think they are not, unfortunately, they were not trained to do it in person. Social skills is a very difficult skill that you just don't see the same as you did 10 years ago, right? Our social skills, our manners, our pleasantries, our banter in person is significantly different than it used to be.
Yeah, and that's why I try to not buy so much online. And I'm a big believer of don't go through the drive-thru. Let's go in. Like this morning, I brought my daughter to school. Every Friday, we don't eat fast food, but we do what's called Chick-fil-A Friday. It's a tradition. We've been doing it for now 7 years before school. That's the only fast food we have, but we go in. We go in because I want to talk to somebody. I want to order from somebody. I don't want to do anything that's artificial or go to the self-checkout because that social interaction is slowly moving away to everything being automated and convenience and et cetera, et cetera. It's almost like the movie WALL-E, right? You sit at home, you want to sit, eat, drink, and then watch a movie and not do anything, right? And I think we're moving towards that. So,
well, and just to your point, that isolation or that isolating part of our culture definitely contributes to things like anxiety and depression. If I am out of practice going and asking for a refill, I'm such a redneck, a refill. If I'm out of practice going and asking for a refill at a restaurant or sending food back, right? Healthy confrontation is literally topic of my conversations 30 times a week. It's like, how do you healthfully disagree with someone? And things like that, our culture of Uber Eats and not having, we do everything virtually. There's a time and a place for all of it. I am an Amazon girl, and I sure love all of my banking online.
Mhm.
However, you're 100% right that we are also missing this critical connection with human beings.
So it leads to my next question about balance, because you mentioned it. It's good to have a little balance. Order online when you need something that you just don't want to drive an hour or two, right? Or do this and that. But let's talk about life balance for adults and kids. So we know adults and children today, we have a lot on their plate. My little one she's balancing piano lessons, softball, volleyball. She's in talented music, art, and theater. So it's like, how do you do all that? She's got 3 plays she starts next week. And I want to try to keep in mind, if she says, hey, I'm tired or I'm struggling, let's take a day off. Let's get some rest. So if we look at adults and kids, when you try to balance work, family, health, the quality of social life, are these things that could lead to more pressure and cause stress and impact someone's mental health if they can't balance?
Yeah, absolutely. Right. So I have, clients who are, struggling with one thing or another. And then the question that they bring to me is like, can I still have this in my life? Right. And so, for instance, like a bodybuilder, can I still be a bodybuilder and have balance in everything else? And frankly, this goes back to like, you're the expert on you, but if it is interfering with your relationships that you care about, if it is preventing you from having regular, healthy eating habits, sleeping habits, doing the things doing things that you once enjoyed, if it is all consuming in thought and actions, then I would venture to say you do not have balance. I also know that, for instance, for bodybuilders, there comes a time in training where there is no more balance, where there are times where you have to devote everything to that. And so you kind of have to weigh for yourself and for your own mental health. Is this something I'm willing to do? Are you willing to miss out on the birthdays for your mental health? I just recently, this last year, did a couple of marathons, and it's the first time I even ran like a full marathon. I didn't even go with a half. I was like, we're just doing it.
Let's just go from a walk to a marathon.
Terrible idea. Totally should have started with a half, but I didn't. And I had to explain to my very young children, mom's 4-hour runs and 1 hour prep and 1 hour cool down is essential to mom's happiness right now. Right. Yeah. I was willing to sacrifice essentially that time with my children, because for me last year during COVID and coming out of all of this COVID world and what have you, I really did need that. I needed all of the long runs to keep my sanity. And so when I have somebody that is like fixated, obsessed, we call it ruminations, where you are thinking about the same things over and over. The questions go back to, is it causing disorder? Can you sleep even though you're thinking about this a lot? If you can't sleep because all you're thinking about is the training, you probably don't have balance. And that's going to have catastrophic effects on your physical well-being and your mental well-being, right?
It's a great point. Yeah, I mean, you're right. Things can consume us so much to where it just takes away from family. It could be like, I want to make extra money and work a lot, right? Or like you said, your 3-year-old is probably like not truly understanding why mom's going run for 4 hours. The 7-year-old probably has a little bit more of an understanding. And there's been times when I'm up late till 11 or 12 o'clock working on another project. And my daughter's like, Dad, why are you working so hard? And at some point it's like, look, hopefully I could stop working by doing these extra things. But you mentioned, hey, if I get up at 5 a.m. and I can't go back to sleep, I'm thinking about that. It's like preventing me from going back. Maybe I am doing too much. And it's great to hear you say that, because it's got me thinking about all the things that I might need to pull back on because it's impacting X, Y, and Z. So that's fascinating. And when we look at other, individuals in general, because when those cases do arise, people use, a lot of things to put Band-Aids. They drink a lot of alcohol. There's drugs. There's other outlets to try to cover those up. But let's talk about what you found to help improve those outcomes. So you mentioned running for you, exercise, we know is probably one of the most powerful drugs. That's actually not a drug, but it has the same impact of many drugs. What else do you find works?
Yeah, I mean, so even when we talk about exercise, a lot of my clients who struggle with maladaptive eating, or like previously known as like eating disorders, they they kind of transfer this like disordered eating into exercise. And now we've dropped a bunch of weight and we're obsessed about how we look and obsessed about what we think. So even exercise should be in moderation, right?
Right.
When we look at things like meditation, for instance, that is something that we know scientifically, thousands of studies have proven the power of a meditation practice. Consistent meditation helps our memory, it helps our sleep, it helps our stress levels with anxiety, it helps bring us out of depression. It has been neurologically proven that meditation is effective. Is it possible to over meditate? I mean, maybe if I am so consumed with meditation that I am abandoning my children, or I'm not eating anymore, or like those are actual possibilities. It's unlikely. I would say healthy things like exercise, yes. Meditation, yes. I give a lot of self-reflective homework in my practices. I think it's important to not let therapy just be a 1 hour a session a week situation. It really should be a introduction to a thought process that you kind of marinate on throughout the week. Obviously, I'm a believer in therapy. I have been in it for many years off and on, and it's, the product that I believe in. But things like, I think church groups, for instance, like I'm not a church goer, but I find that a lot of people have relief of depression, right? Or relief of anxiety by going to church. I also find that some people get it when they go to church. And so these healthy things, quote unquote, that we've heard about throughout our childhood, eating healthy, right? Treating our bodies well. All of that has to be tempered with like you as a human being, right? Is eating healthy going to become quickly, is that a trigger? Is that an obsession? Or you see people that all of a sudden become yogis and they're like so hardcore about it. You're like, you don't seem to have the balance, right? You don't talk about anything else. And we don't even know where you're at or what you're doing. So everything in balance. I feel like, I hope that was a kind of an answer.
No, that was fantastic, because you're right. I mean, it's a lot of things. What works for you might not work for me, and vice versa. And everybody's got something that if it's working, even if it's a placebo effect, even if we know, I drink more water and I have less stress, even if there's no science to prove that, great, keep drinking water.
If it's working.
I look at athletes that have eaten something that I would say, man, that's not the really right thing to eat 4 hours before a game. Oh, I just scored 3 touchdowns, or I scored 40 points. Okay. Who am I going to tell you that might not work every time, but if you feel like you're doing that every time and that's what's working, then don't change that. Right. And I think that's a great point. Let's talk about just a couple of more questions. If you have to give our listeners just a few tips or habits that have been proven to improve mental health or reduce stress, anxiety, like these maybe 1, 2, or 3 things, what would those really critical things be that could really help change behavior or improve outcomes?
Yeah. So it's just, I feel like I've been in the industry so long and it's going to just be a broken record, but it's just true. Having good sleep patterns, right? Like a good sleep routine is so critical to your mental health. And I feel like the best example of this are new parents who have newborns, and they all do crazy things. And, then they come out of the fog because they finally start getting sleep and they reflect back on that time. And if you didn't black out, whatever memories you have are insane, right? Walking around the house with vomit on you. Like that is not normal, but you do that because you're sleep deprived. and you literally are just surviving. We have to have effective sleep because that literally brings our brain's chemistry to a healing place. So all of the stress from the day that you have had, regardless of what it was, without a real sleep cycle, your brain stays in a state of anxiety and stress.
Yeah.
You have to have sufficient sleep. Obviously, nutrition is critical as well. I have parents tell me, being that I work with so many children, I have so many parents say, I don't want to go to a psychiatrist because they're going to put my kids on meds. And I say, okay, have you tried completely altering everything that your child ingests? And they're like, what do you mean? And I'm like, you can't give your kids 5 days worth of Tyson chicken nuggets and expect them to perform in the classroom or well at home. Right. And you said you do Chick-fil-A Fridays. I am a Chick-fil-A Monday through Saturday. Like we are addicts. Okay. So I'm not judging. This is not
it's an A-rated restaurant. Like if you look at that,
fabulous.
Some chains, because they use free range chicken. Yeah.
They definitely have MSG because I'm truly addicted to what it is that they sell. So I'm not judging, but I am absolutely a believer that what we are putting into our bodies has a direct line to our emotional health, right? Caffeine alone, sugar intake, like all of these things. Talk to somebody that actually knows what they're talking about, nutritionists and dietitians. Like talk to the pros. That has a huge effect. And then I also think when it comes to mental health, one thing that we forget along with sleep and nutrition is that there could be countless physiological reasons why you are experiencing mental health issues, right? So my first session, in addition to saying like, what are your goals? Or when was the last time you went to the doctor and had your numbers checked?
Right.
Especially with men. Men very much struggle with going to physicians and getting their blood work done, getting your T numbers checked or what have you. Mm-hmm. Before we really start diving into the mental history, I want to make sure that your physical body is being taken care of, because then we're swimming upstream and having to work twice as hard on something that perhaps a hormone imbalance could be the answer. Yeah. Right. And I'm digging up trauma from your childhood, but really maybe you just needed a balance physically. So I would say starting with those 3 areas of sleep, of nutrition, of what am I putting into my body? Is it serving me healthfully? And then making sure that my body is actually aligned before even approaching mental health.
Yeah. Well, and let's talk about you a little bit, because you mentioned for you were training for a marathon. And my last question is really, I can understand from talking to others and interviewing others in the past, your job is draining. It can be draining very mentally and physically on yourself, because, you're consuming all this information from so many people, and a lot of it's stressful, right? You have to listen, mm-hmm. You have to pay attention, you have to absorb that and then try to help them. And then you go home and go, oh my gosh, that's probably so much information that, I need, it just affects you in a lot of different ways. So how do you, outside of maybe just exercise, but how do you have work-life balance? How do you control your emotions and just have a good quality of life to where, you don't let the stress of your job impact you?
Yeah. I think that's a practice in and of itself, right? We are all finding balance in different ways. And I'm in a phase of life right now where my days are long, and it has nothing to do with my job. My job is like the vacation portion. My children and their critical life questions and caretaking is really what is more training, frankly. But I can say professionally, for instance, in years past, especially when I was working with, in the school districts and juvenile detention and things like that, what I found was that I started experiencing what we call compassion fatigue, and then ultimately burnout. So for the first time in my career, after sessions, I was like giving myself a break that I never really needed before, or I'd sit in my car during lunch because I didn't want anybody to knock on my door. And so I had to be proactive in addressing that, right? First, I had to recognize it, and then I had to proactively do something about it. And for me, what was most effective, in addition to starting like a physical regimen of exerting energy physically, so whether that was like on the bike or outside or digging holes with my son, like whatever, that was helpful. But also, I literally started doing a mindfulness every single session. So I'm obviously out of practice with that. But if we had done this podcast 3 years ago, before we even got started, I would have said, this is for me. This isn't for you. But you and I together, if you don't mind, are going to take 3 minutes of complete and utter silence. And we are not going to think, and we are going to let go of what was before us. And I'm not going to worry about what's coming after us. I am clearing my head completely of the to-do list. And for 3 minutes, I literally sat in utter silence, just breathing. And my kids were floored by it. And I realized, like, I'm not the only one who not only needs those 3 minutes, but I actually deserve that, right? Like as a human being doing so much, not just, like for the world, but like just doing so much, we are actually deserving of peace. And nobody's giving you that, right? Like you got to find it, and you got to proactively search and seek it and practice it every single day. And so now I have a more flexible schedule, and I get to do that at my leisure. But for me, clearing my head and truly being present with whoever I'm with is how I keep from it piling up. And that gives me the I guess allowance to really let go every single session.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Phenomenal information, based on everything that you told our listeners today. I love our conversation. It felt like it was just a normal conversation. I didn't realize we were recording at some point. I was like, wait, we're not even, we're having a podcast. I've hit the record button already. It's like, I felt like we're just having a normal phone conversation. But before I let you go, we have what's called our curveball round, where I am going to ask you things that you have no idea what's coming.
Sweet.
So the first question I ask every guest, because I am a music junkie. You mentioned Deep. It was funny when you mentioned Deep Ellum, because I've been to Dallas a good bit. I actually attended Lollapalooza '98 to see Tool and a couple of other bands back in the day.
Okay.
I don't remember. And we spent some time in Deep Ellum in 1990. The Prodigy was there at one of these clubs, and I was like, I don't remember. I was pretty young. I was 22, I think, at the time. So Let's go to music. If you could be the lead singer of any band today, who would that be?
Oh my gosh. I don't know. I am such a basic girl. I'm like so streamlined and basic. Despite all of the, like, my first concert was Kiss and Ted Nugent. And my favorite concert of all time was Miley Cyrus. As crazy as that sounds, she is such a great entertainer.
Spectrums, right?
I'm telling you. So I wouldn't want to be a lead singer because they're killing it.
Right.
Like I couldn't do what they do. Like it's unreal. So, and you judge, but when you go to a Miley Cyrus concert, just like a Kiss concert, you will be entertained. They are not just, repeating their record. It is total insanity. So anyway.
So as a hard rock heavy metal fan,
oh gosh,
I went to I took my daughter to see Taylor Swift in the Superdome in New Orleans. And it was honestly,
oh wow.
It wasn't my first pop show. When I was like 12, I did see Vanilla Ice. I don't want to admit that was my first true concert, but I was blown away. Just the production, the unison, these little things light up on your wrist. And I was like, felt like it was in Disney World more than I was in a concert. I was fast. I can see why so many people are engaged at those type of shows. So no, that was cool. I think that's great. And any form of entertainment is fun. All right, question 2. If you had to go back and do one thing differently in your life, what would that be?
I would have bought a house way sooner. I have no idea why I was so intimidated by the home purchase process, but I probably would have not stayed in Deep Ellum as long as I did and rented. And I would have bought a place in Deep Ellum. That's probably what I would have done. I should have done it. You know, no regrets, but
You got that tattoo that says no regrets.
right.
Well, it's funny. My dad's friend, when I was 18, I had a lot of sports and baseball cards. And he's like, if you sell those now, you can buy yourself a nice piece of property. And I was like, you know what? If I would have done that, who knows how much value that would be right now. So it's kind of funny you said that.
Yeah.
Last question. If you could have dinner with one person who's not a family, a friend, just somebody, and I don't, believe in celebrities, but let's just say somebody that's just not someone you know that you would be like, I've admired this person, I'd love to have dinner with them, who would that be?
I mean, for the purpose of literally today only, Johnny Depp. I want to sit down with that man and
you've been watching the the court session, right?
No. I've been watching Supreme Court issues, and I'm watching real news. No, of course I've been listening to that, and I just want so desperately to work on his inner child. The counselor in me is dying. I am dying. I want little Johnny to have some inner child work with me.
Interesting.
It's so random. I'm sorry. But yeah, there are much more educated, people that would probably be better, but that's who I think of.
Well, Brandi, thank you so much for the time. This was fascinating. This was a lot of fun. And I know our listeners have enjoyed the time that you spent with us today. So thank you so much for being on the All Me podcast. We look forward at some point to having you back in the future and coming up with something else we can talk about, maybe outside of mental health.
Anytime. Absolutely.
Have a good day.
Thank you.
Well, that's it for today's show. Thanks for listening to the All Me podcast from the Taylor Hooten Foundation, a nonprofit organization leading a national campaign to enlighten people to the truths about appearance and performance-enhancing substances and inspiring people to live and compete without the use of these substances. Please be sure to subscribe to our podcast and tune in to our next episode.